Okay, tonight we're going to talk about classical era variations. So, the last few lectures have all been about Europe and Asia. So, tonight is going to talk about the Americas and the southern parts of Africa that don't necessarily fit into the mold of what a classical civilization should look like. So, our first question: to what extent do the histories of Africa and the Americas parallel those of Eurasia? So, how are they similar? And then, in what ways did they forge new or different paths? So, basically, in what ways are they different? So, here we've got our two columns. The ways that Africa and America are similar to Eurasia. In both instances, all the civilizations are going to originally be founded by hunter-gatherer peoples. So you find hunter-gatherers in Eurasia and Africa and the Americas. Both will go through an agricultural revolution, so they did have farming in Africa and the Americas as well. And both will have civilizations that are based around an agricultural economy. So both are going to have large scale civilizations that have things like cities and monumental architecture because of things like agriculture taking place. Now, how are Africa and America different from Eurasia? There's less people overall in the southern parts of Africa and especially in America. So their populations are smaller. That means they're going to have less number of civilizations because they have less people. So they don't need as many civilizations. And it's more difficult to travel there. So you're not going to see people moving around or leaving civilizations to start new ones because it's so difficult as far as the geography goes and the climate to travel across the Americas. You're also not going to see pastoral societies. So remember, pastoral societies are groups of nomadic people who live with at least one type of domesticated animal, and they move around a lot so that their animals can graze. The reason you don't see pastoral societies, especially in America, is the Americas only had one animal that could be domesticated, and that was the llama in Peru. So in North America, there were really no large animals that could be domesticated, so there's no need for a pastoral society. You're also going to see there's a lot more land available in the Americas and Southern Africa. That's just because there's less people settled there. So each individual person would have access to more land. So labor is going to be more valuable in Africa and America than it is in places like Eurasia, especially places like the Roman Empire, where it's a very densely populated empire. Land is going to be more valuable to the Romans than, say, in Africa or the Americas, because in Africa and the Americas, they had access to more land. And then you're also going to see, at least in one civilization in Africa, the Niger River Valley civilization will actually develop without any kind of organized government. So you're not going to see a centralized government or law codes or things like that. All right, question number 2, how did African proximity to Eurasia shape its history? So that basically means, how did being close to Europe and Asia shape Africa's history? And then how did American separation from the Eastern Hemisphere affect its development? So let's start with Africa. Africa being close to Eurasia helps in several ways. First of all, the northern part of Africa was actually a part of the Roman Empire. So you can look up here on the map kind of this red section, and then it'll eventually spread down here into some of this purple as well. That was a part of the Roman Empire. So they participated in Mediterranean trade. They knew things like Latin. They were exposed to Greek and Roman architecture. You're also going to see from the Middle East, once Islam begins forming, you'll have Middle Eastern traders coming from Arabia through Egypt and then going across the Sahara Desert here. They'll be bringing camels in. That is going to open up trans-Saharan trade. So the biggest way that Africa is affected by being close to Europe and Asia is mostly through trade. Again, over here on the east coast of Africa, you have large trading cities develop as they're going to be a part of the Indian Ocean trade that's off the coast of East Africa. So that's going to expose Africa to new crops, to new animals that are coming from Europe, coming from Asia, the Middle East, that kind of thing. This will also expose Africa to new religions, so Christianity from the Roman Empire, Islam from the Middle East, both of those will be diffused into Africa through trade. Now, how America being isolated hurts its development. America, like I said before, has no large animals to domesticate besides the llama, and the llama is not really useful for farming. It's not really effective to use a llama to try and plow fields. They're really ornery animals. So as far as their agriculture is concerned, it's going to be hurt by the fact that they don't have large animals. And they are not going to be exposed to technologies from Eurasia. The most helpful one would have been metallurgy. So in America, they don't develop metal tools on their own. That's going to be something that gets fused over once Europeans and Africans and Asians start crossing over to the Americas. All right, our last question. What features common to all civilizations can you identify in the civilizations of Africa and the Americas? So how do they kind of fit the definition of what a civilization is? And then what distinguishing features give them a distinctive identity? So what do they have that's uniquely theirs? So, common characteristics that Africa and America share with all civilizations, they're agricultural, they have social hierarchy, so there's going to be people at the top of the social ladder and people at the bottom, so social classes. All of them are patriarchal, so for the most part, men are controlling the society. They all have urban centers, so places like cities are going to develop in Africa and the Americas. They'll have things like monumental architecture, and they'll all eventually collapse. Things that make them distinctive, like I said before, in the Niger River Valley, they developed a civilization without having a government system, so they somehow had thousands of people all living together without any kind of government needing to regulate them. The Mayan civilization in Mexico, they developed writing and a very extensive calendar. And then also in the Americas, you see the Maya and the Moche both practice human sacrifice, which was unique to the Americas. So here I have examples at the bottom left. You've got the Mayan calendar, and then this is an example of monumental architecture. So even though they didn't have access to European technologies, they're still going to be building large buildings, usually for religious purposes, which is exactly the same reason why most large buildings were built in Europe and Asia. So that's it for classical era variations. If you have any questions, write them down, bring them to class, and we will discuss.